Okay, welcome everybody. I think people are starting to log on to the webinar here. We're going to get started in probably under a minute here. I'll just give it another like 30 seconds or so for people to keep getting let in. And then we'll do some introductions. But thank you for joining us. Okay, without further ado, I'm gonna get this started. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is a presentation on the funding process for ResOA school capital applications to the Office of the Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. I am Amy Slattery. I am the budget director for the unit, and we're really happy that you're here joining us today. I'm gonna turn it over to Nelson next to introduce himself.
Nelson Andino, Amy's deputy, colleague with Maite. Happy to see everyone here 1 year later.
Okay, Maite, you wanna say hello?
Hi everyone, my name is Maite Carino, and I'm the Capital Project and Budget Analyst. I'm more than happy to connect with everyone and everyone to get to know me. I am your mostly go-to person when it comes to ResOA school applications.
Awesome. And then we are so lucky to be joined by 3 representatives from SCA. I don't know if you all want to introduce yourself, but I'm going to throw it over to Mrs. To introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Massis. I'm one of the ResOA program managers here at the SCA.
Great. John Seltzer. I also work with Massis and Brian on the ResOA program.
I'm Brian again from the SCA as well.
All right, so let's get started without further ado. If we can advance to the next slide. So yeah, once again, thank you to all of our school principals, our teachers, our parent coordinators, etc., our PTA reps, everyone that's interested in hearing a little bit more about our process. We're going to talk about some basic eligibility, and we're going to talk about the application process through our office, and then we're going to have SCA do a brief presentation of their own where they can kind of dig into more of the nuts and bolts of eligibility and that kind of other stuff. And then at the end, we'll conclude with a Q&A session where you can ask, whatever questions that you would like to get answered, and we will moderate that. So if there's repetitive questions, we'll try to ask them only once. But those of you new to this process, and maybe those of you who are not, every year, each of the borough presidents are allocated a certain amount of capital funding by a formula that is written out in the city charter. And it's formula driven, and each borough, it's based on the underlying capital budget for that year, but it's allocated to each borough based on a function of land mass and the borough's population. So just for context, of the 4 boroughs, Manhattan actually gets the 4th lowest capital allocation because we're so small, I think, and we also don't have the largest population. But of the amount of money that we get, we try to do our best to spread it out to worthy projects, both, not just schools, but the amount of money we get has to go to our schools, our parks, our libraries, other city projects, and also nonprofits and cultural institutions. So, we get a lot of applications that we try to, go through with all of the individual groups, and, the borough president ultimately decides what we're able to fund in a given year. So just briefly, the presentation, like I said, we're going to go through kind of what is ResOA and give you some examples of eligible projects. We're then going to hear from the SCA, and we'll talk about our specific office application, which is different from the city councils, and I'll touch upon that a little bit briefly later. And then we'll end with some Q&A. So next slide. Okay, so for our process, the main thing you need to do is to go to our website, which the URL is listed right there. And we're also going to post this presentation and the recording of this webinar to our website as well. So you'll be able to check back. But there will be a link to our own office generated application that schools need to use. It's only the application you will use is only for schools, and you'll set up a profile. You have to make sure you have all the right logins. You should do that sooner rather than later in case there needs to be a password reset or anything like that. Once you have that housekeeping in order, then you should start to think about what it is that you actually want to request the funding for. You should, if you're not the school principal, you should talk to the school principal, because absolutely we need to get their sign off and buy-in on what the request is. And you should reach out to SCA, and there'll be some contact information given to you in this presentation. But you should reach out to them to make sure that what you're proposing is one capitally eligible under the ResOA program, and to get a realistic cost estimate for it as well, because that's very important that the right amount of money is asked for. And then you should complete the application, obviously. The deadline is, I believe it's either February 20th or the 21st. It'll be
21st.
on 21st. Okay.
That Friday.
Also on the website, and I recommend doing it sooner rather than later, because when everyone waits till the last day, the system gets burdened and could crash. So it's a very simple application that could take you no longer than an hour. Honestly, it's basic information, so there's no reason that you need to wait. If you know what you want to ask for, you should submit. And if you do want to request a meeting with us, you can do that on our website, but you don't need to wait to submit the application to request a meeting, or the other way around. You can they don't have to be done in any particular order. All right, next slide. This is a screenshot of what it looks like when you do go to our website and you click on the application link for schools. It'll take you to our grants portal, and this is what it looks like. And we've embedded a wonderful little QR code here that'll take you directly there. And there's also the web link there as well. Next slide. Okay, these are just some tips that we hope are helpful. We do about bi-weekly newsletters. It's good to sign up for our newsletters, so we can put in helpful reminders of there, both in terms of when applications are available, when you can start to request meetings, reminders of due dates, all that kind of stuff. I just mentioned that you should start it with ample time, so you can make sure that your application is submitted. I think we mentioned this at some point later, but we really mandate that you only submit one application per school. If you do submit more than one, we'll only consider one. And I can tell you right now, we'll consider the one that's for the lowest request. So only submit one, and submit for what you think is your number one need. We're going to be opening the application before the holidays, most likely early next week. So you can check back at the website, but yeah, expect it very soon. As I mentioned, you should request a cost estimate from SCA. They are the only ones that can provide real quotes that can be used. I know sometimes a very earnest PTA member will want to go out and get maybe an external price estimate, thinking that they're able to save money, but all of the work is done by SCA. All of the cost estimates are only done by them. So save yourself the time and just reach out to them. Just in terms of giving you some realistic timelines, the funds that we're talking about are for fiscal year 26. So that will be for the time period of July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026. And the allocation will get noted in the city's budget, but it does take some time to actually go through all of the next steps, which SCA will touch upon as well. So just because the allocation is there in the budget doesn't mean if, for instance, if you're requesting technology, it doesn't show up the next day. It does take some time, so you should kind of prepare for that. And if you are a school that's in a co-located space and you're doing a request for, say, an auditorium project, for instance, that impacts all the schools, you should submit one uniform request and all of the school principals should sign off on that project. All right, next. Some more tips. Whether you're new to this process or not, you probably will not be surprised to know that construction projects are very, very expensive. And elected officials' budgets are somewhat limited. And I can tell you as the borough president's office, we have all of the schools in Manhattan to try to fund. So if you have a very expensive project, it's almost certain that we would not be able to give you all of the funding necessary for it. So you should be aware of who your other elected officials are, namely the city council member. So it's wise to ask the city council member for the same thing you're asking for us, and we can share the cost. You can also reach out to your state representatives. They have a different process, so you should reach out to them directly. Again, one application per school. If you submit more, we'll only consider one and we'll consider the one with the lowest price tag. We do not, as the Manhattan Borough President's Office, we do not do participatory budgeting, but several council members do. So you might want to check in, if you haven't already, with your council member to see if they are doing participatory budgeting. And if they are, if you want to consider maybe trying to get your school's project considered as part of that very lengthy process. And since it's their process, I will defer to them for you to reach out to them to learn about what it is. And then again, for expensive big projects, you could also consider trying to reach out to the Manhattan delegation and the city council speaker to see if they would be able to kick in additional funds for those projects. Next. If you are a charter school, that's a separate process from traditional public schools. You have to submit the CAP grants application, which is a much more lengthier application, I can assure you, than our school's application. So you should go to the OMB website or the CAPS grant portal on the OMB website. We have the web link there, and take a look at eligibility criteria and all of that. And again, it's a very separate process. So, and as I mentioned, we are here for you to set up to set up meetings. Actually, go back. Sorry, Maite. Previous slide. Nope, forward. Other direction. Okay, great. So on our website will be a link for how to request a meeting with our office, with our team. We're going to be posting that link within the next day or so. And the meetings will begin in January and they'll go through roughly the end of March. And they're 30-minute meetings. We probably won't even need the full 30 minutes to go through your project. You don't have to do a meeting. It is helpful. It's up to your discretion. And as I mentioned, the deadline for school applications is February 21st at 5 p.m. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so again, just to kind of give you a sense of the timeline, as I mentioned, our application is due to be live within the next week or so. And it will close in February of 2025. We will be spending the months of January, February, and maybe even into March, meeting with schools to go over your applications if you choose. We then spend March really reviewing all of the applications. And if we have follow-up questions, you should be responsive to your email and include the best contact information in your application. If the principal isn't going to be the one that can answer a question quickly, you should make sure that we have the right contact information so we can reach out to someone quickly and get an answer. We submit our first round of grant awards in April. We then get an amended number, which this is probably more information that's needed. So we do often submit a second round of allocations in early May. But regardless, the budget is adopted by June 30th per the charter mandate. And then in July, we will start to send out award letters, both yeses and nos to schools to let you know what our decisions were. All right. And I think Nelson, and just FYI, is dropping some helpful links into the chat. So pay attention to what he's putting in there. So what happens after budget adoption? And I think SCA, again, will talk about this more, but the allocations that borough presidents and council members make are directed to the SCA. They then, go through their process of, bidding out the projects and, making sure that the adequate funding is in place to be able to either move forward or to see if we need to get more money or et cetera, et cetera. And they will be reaching out to you to let you know what the next steps are. All right, and we have in there approximately November, but Ms. East can correct me on that. And next slide. I'm not going to go through this slide because this is what we generally our experience has been SEA's timeline, but I'll let them kind of go through that when they do their presentation. So I believe on that note, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Ms. East from SEA to go through their projects or to go through their slides.
Absolutely, Amy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gonna switch sharing screens. Someone could just confirm you're seeing this new one. Great.
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Masis. I'm one of the ResAway program coordinators here at the SCA. I'm going to go over some information about the ResAway program for everyone today. So if you're unfamiliar, the SCA manages construction projects for DOE city schools and DOE city schools only. All capital funds come to us, whether they're from the 5-year plan or ResAway funding from council members and borough presidents. So I know Amy said you guys don't do PB, but I just want everyone to always be on the same page about this. PB is a part of ResAway. So if you get an award letter from your council member and then you also win PB and you see it's like 150 allocation for both, you're not getting 300. It's the same budget. We've just had confusion in the past. So we always like to touch base on that really quickly. So what are some typical ResAway projects? Some of the more common ones are large athletic field renovations, gymnasium upgrades, science labs, auditoriums, bathrooms, or supplemental cooling projects. We could always do parts of a room or do the whole room renovation at once. It's really up to the funding available in the current year and the school's priorities. So what makes the project eligible? So since 2021, all grants must be a minimum of $50,000. Construction projects must provide a permanent enhancement to the space. All equipment must have a 5-year lifespan unless it is technology, in which case it can have a 3-year lifespan. And for these items, we're talking about smart boards, laptops, desktops, and to a certain extent, STEM cards. And for everyone who didn't see the Q&A in the chat, this presentation is going to go out to everyone via email later, so don't feel like you have to rush and take notes on these individual items. So what is not eligible? Window ACs, unfortunately, are not eligible. That is probably the most common item we get asked for. Library books, loose furniture, generally is an eligible photocopier software, toners, staffing. All those items that kind of just last year to year or month to month are not eligible through the ResAway program. So about ResAway budgets. So this is a lot of information on the slide, but basically the budget for our program is set by the elected officials. We always have to work with them on how much funding you get. If, for example, you want to double the scope of the project, we have to go back to the council member and the borough president for more funding. That's why we always ask you reach out to us. We want to know what your scope is upfront so we could give you an appropriate estimate so that when Maddie and Amy get your application, you have enough funding for your scope of work. We don't want you to apply, ask for 100,000, and then we come back to you and say, no, that's going to cost 400,000. We don't want you to apply again the next year for the same project if we could avoid it. So this is all alongside to just say the scope is the project is funded at a certain amount, and we don't get more funding if you go over budget. We have to go back to the elected officials for that funding. Just please come to us, ask us for the estimate. We want to make sure you apply for the right amount of funding. So just to go over the budget timeline, Amy had this up briefly, but essentially we're in this January to March period for FY26 projects, right? Elected officials are contacting schools, you guys are identifying projects. Until June, the city is negotiating the budget. July 1st comes, the start of the fiscal year happens. Over the summer, everyone gets notified. We begin our process at the SCA of making those projects in our system. Sometimes we reach out to you to verify scopes, and then we receive authorization from OMB. Now, OMB must certify the Resume program every year, and until that happens, we cannot contact schools. So this year that has not happened yet, which is why schools haven't been contacted. That usually happens sometime between September and February. So we're hoping to get approval from them in December or January, and once that happens, we'll begin reaching out to schools right away. And so, for example, the FY25 programs hasn't happened yet. We haven't had that approval. So we're in this September to February range for the FY25 programs funded last year. So project estimates, again, please, please, please reach out to the SCA. We cannot stress enough how much it delays your project, frankly, and how much it'll prevent the project from getting executed in a timely manner if we don't apply with the right amount of funding. We just really want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about how much a project is going to cost and how long it's going to take, and we really don't want to delay anyone's project. So please reach out to us. We'll make sure we give you an appropriate estimate for the scope of work you need. Quickly on co-locations and Resume grants. So if you are a school with if you're a school and you share the building with multiple other schools, please make sure you're all on the same page when applying to the Manhattan Borough President's office. We really don't want to get in a situation where one school applies and the other school doesn't want to sign off on that scope of work. If we have to shut down an auditorium, for example, to complete your project and both principals aren't on the same page, it's a little difficult for us to kind of get through the process, right? So if there are multiple principals in the building, please make sure that when you apply, you kind of are on the same page on the scope of work. Now, if the room being renovated is for only one school, that matters less, but we just really want to make sure that the schools are on the same page before the applications are submitted. It makes both our lives and the Manhattan Borough President's lives much easier. And to facilitate that, we always ask that you just make sure your school IDs and building IDs are sent along. Sometimes there's some confusion with schools at multiple locations. Just make it clear on your application which school is applying and for what site. So this is just an example of a school in Queens, Jamaica High School. There are four schools at Jamaica High School, all sharing the same building. So for example, if Hillside Academy was going to apply just for themselves, we need them to make it clear that was just for their school. If they're applying on behalf of all four schools, we want the application to reflect that as well. Similarly, for special ed schools, many of you have multiple sites. So we really need to know that if you're applying on behalf of a special education school, we need to know which site the application is for. Changes to Resume programs. So because the Resume program is part of the city budget, making changes to it has become more difficult over time. So right now, if you're applying for technology funding, for example, and you need to change that funding to construction or STEM cards mid-year, it takes 4 months to make that change. We're only telling you this because we really want to make sure that if you're applying, you apply for the exact right thing. So always feel free to reach out to us and we'll tell you how to word your application to the Manhattan Borough President's office. You can make changes mid-year. We're never going to prevent you from doing that. We're just here to tell you that we need to go back to OMB for that same approval we get to start the project. So it will cause a delay, and we just want to prevent that for as many people as possible. So just always reach out to us, and we'll make sure and coordinate with Amy and Maddie to make sure that you're applying for the right thing and that it gets submitted for approval correctly. So this is just photos of 2 older approved projects, and I want to go over 3 specific projects we've done in Manhattan over the past few years. So this is PS 185 Sensory Gym. This gym specifically in FY20 costs around $300,000. That is fairly typical of the average range of a sensory gym. You can see here We added a climbing wall. There's a bunch of safety mats. There's this movable equipment we added. We did some furniture in the space as well, and the flooring was brand new. So this is a fairly typical room renovation. DSF carries out most of this work, but it still goes through SCA as part of the ResOA program. So this is just one typical example of a common project we fund. Another one we want to do here is hydroponics labs. So we get most of these for elementary and middle schools, but these are photos of Stuyvesant High School's lab. So you can see this lab kind of goes into two different spaces. There's several pieces of equipment here. So we have a vertical tower for growing plants, one set of racks here, two tanks, and a few other racks here. This project addressed the floors. You can see the electrical wires from the ceilings, which we often need for these hydroponics labs to prevent wires from going across the whole room. This lab was much larger than typical labs, so it cost 800,000, for example, but almost all of the typical hydroponics labs in elementary schools can get done for 200,000. So just please reach out to us and we'll kind of work with you on an estimate there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, those are two smaller projects. Some of the larger projects we could do are full auditorium renovations, right? So this is a Stewart Park campus. This is a large auditorium with a lot of art on the walls that needed to be protected during construction. We tore up every seat. We redid the flooring. We made the auditorium ADA accessible. We made a route that was ADA accessible from the auditorium to the exterior. So we added a ramp. This is kind of on the high end of projects we do with ResOA. This was a $2 million job, and this is not common for ResOA projects, but it is kind of at the other end of going from those smaller room renovations to renovating a full large space within a building. And this is kind of like the high-end example of what you'll see through ResOA program. And just on the last note, these are our emails. Again, they're going out with the PowerPoint that the Manhattan Borough President is going to send. And I just going to want to give a shout out. I know some of our external affairs folks are also on the call from the SCA, Yvette Knight and Joshua Adams. So thank you to them.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Cease, and everyone at SCA. Maite, if you can just share our contacts for one more, the last slide of our presentation. Again, we will send this out, but just so you have them handy right here. Gonna do questions now. Again, I'm Amy. Maite is our budget analyst, but specializes in schools. So she's really the person that you're going to reach out to directly. You can always CC myself and Nelson. So now I'm just going to go through some of any questions. We don't have too many in the chat, so I encourage you, if you have any, to throw some in, and then I will I thought of a question of my own that I would ask and answer, but let's see. Okay, so there was a question about cooling upgrades, which I see that you've answered, Ms. Cease, that said, is there such a thing as a cooling upgrade, as in asking to replace air conditioner units, as that can be super expensive to change units that are on top windows? Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so unfortunately, ACs aren't capitally eligible because they don't have a 5-year lifespan and they're not a permanent upgrade to the space. So we just haven't been able to do AC units for well over a decade now, I think possibly ever. What we can do is supplemental cooling units. That's a larger scale project, usually for a cafeteria, gymnasium, or an auditorium, where we add these fixed units to the wall to provide cooling. But the AC units, unfortunately, no, the replacement of those has to come out of your school's budget.
And those supplemental units, how much would that be, for instance, for like your average cafeteria?
Yeah, so for the average auditorium, it's probably
Okay.
350. Cafeterias and gyms, slightly less than that. If you get into a middle school or a high school with just a larger space, that cost grows with the space. But you can always reach out to us. We'll take a look, figure out the square footage, and kind of give you a rough idea of how much that's going to cost you.
Okay. Here's another one. For STEM carts, are there companies that you recommend? Can you kind of talk through how that works, Missy?
Yeah, so all of the STEM carts we purchase at the SCA have to go for 2 specific vendors with a state contract. One is A+, and the other one is TEQ. Those are the 2 vendors. They do the whole STEM cart program within ResOA. They'll have specific folks that work with New York City and work with our F&E team or Yeah, they work with our F&E team, so they know the process. They'll be able to give you quotes directly, actually.
So they will give the quotes directly. They don't have to
Yeah.
go to you.
Yeah, for STEM cards specifically, A+ and TEQ could give you the quotes. Just make sure you speak to their folks who work with ResOA.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, let me just see. Yep, okay. All right, so here's a question. If you are a District 75 school, should you submit one per site? Yes. Yes. If you have a follow-up to that, let me know, but the answer to that is yes. Because we need the clearly identifying information per site.
Yeah.
So that's an exception to the only District 75 should submit individual applications per site.
Yeah, and if you apply to the District 75 site and you apply, for example, a 50,000 technology award, that has to all go to one location. We can't split your funding and do it for 2 different sites. Each site has to get $50,000 allocation. OMB
Minimum.
checks that religiously. It has to be, yes, minimum.
Yeah. Okay, great. Another one. We haven't been accepted for a grant for auditorium seats upgrade for a few years because of the high cost. Should we keep submitting the same grant or better to ask for something at a lower amount range? Okay, very good question. As I mentioned initially, we have a budget that we have to deal with. We're constricted by every year, and we have to try to consider the needs of all Manhattan schools, all Manhattan parks, all Manhattan libraries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So while we say we want you to submit a request for the highest need, we do also have to be realistic about the amount of money that we have. This is something we could talk through a little bit more in an individual meeting, but I think as a general rule of thumb, yes, you should request the project that you're in highest need of, and you should obviously submit the realistic request. And then when we meet, we can sort of talk about maybe strategies for asking some from us, some from the council, maybe spreading it out into phases of the project. So some of the work could begin, and we would obviously have to talk to SCA about that. Yeah, so let's talk about that in a meeting. And on that note, there's a next question. There are multi-year projects, right? Yes, because it does take oftentimes many years to get the amount of funding that's necessary for the project to go forward. I hate that that's the case. I would love nothing more than to be able to fully fund a project in a given year, so there isn't this holdup. But like I said, we do have constraints, so we do have to be a little bit realistic. So we should talk through that on a case-by-case basis. Okay. This, I think, is for you, Ms. East. My school needs athletic field upgrade. How much will it cost?
Yeah, so athletic field upgrades range dramatically, right? Is it a baseball field, softball field? Do you have a full football field? Reach out to us. We'll take a look at the project. Its location matters also, right? So just please reach out to us. We'll give you an estimate.
Okay, if we are reapplying for additional funds after we get an estimate from SCA, do we apply for the estimate minus the existing funds we have already received? Yes, but in your application, you should make it very clear how much you've already received. And sort of as an overarching thing I should mention is, if you are a school where you've been requesting money for a project and you've been receiving small allocations or allocations less than the full amount that you need for year after year, please continue to submit the request for that project and not something new, so we can close it out. Hopefully, I really want to, especially this next year, since it's the end of Mark's first term as borough president, I would really love to be able to close out as many projects as possible. So that is my number one tip, is to, if you do have a project that has some funding, but it needs additional funding, please submit for that project, unless there's, some extenuating circumstance where you really need something else that's, crucial before that. What is the application deadline? It is March sorry, it is February 21st. The council and the borough presidents have different deadlines. So even if you are applying to to the different offices for the same project, you still have to adhere to each one's deadline. So you should make sure you talk to them. Can Resoway funding apply to the general construction of schools in NYC?
So the SCA does do all construction of new schools in New York City. We have a separate budget from that that's funded centrally by the mayor's office and the city council. And we have a whole process where we identify seat need across districts in New York City to determine where new schools go.
So that's not Resoway.
Yeah, not Resoway. No one has enough Resoway money for a new school.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there two applications for technology and capital improvement? As far as our office goes, we have one uniform application. The city council has a different process. And I can't speak to that because I don't entirely know what it is. I just know what ours is. But we have one application, and in there you note what you're requesting for. You have to be very clear about what it is. Okay, this might be an SCA question.
Yep.
Oh, it's technical.
Yeah, I
What
could do
about
some-
repairing splitters or adding them to the existing system in spaces where there are none? We have 9 rooms with no working heat or AC.
So that goes a few ways. So if you're just asking for ACs, again, not capital eligible, unfortunately. If you have a central air system that is for some reason not addressing 9 rooms specifically, SCA can send out an engineer and architect to try and see if the system can be extended to cover those 9 rooms. But if it's just 9 classrooms, probably the best way to go about it is just to use your school's budget for ACs, unfortunately. If you need electrical upgrades to those rooms to support those ACs, that SCA could do. But chances are, it sounds like you just need to repair existing units, so that wouldn't be possible. Like, if you had an existing central air system, that we might address, but just reach out to us and we'll go over the specifics with you. The answer is like yes or no, depending on what the actual system is and what you need done.
Next one also, for sensory rooms, is there a specific company or companies that you use?
I don't know the specific vendors we purchase the equipment from, but once you get the funding, the teams that do the sensory rooms tend to do all the sensory rooms across the city within our project management team. So they'll have the list of vendors that they use, and they'll give you options. Each sensory room is pretty unique in terms of which pieces of equipment we use. So they'll have the catalog of vendor applicable items for you.
Awesome. Okay, another one. Is there a list of eligible / non-eligible tech that we can apply for? Do we still reach out to SCA for tech cost estimates?
Yeah, so the tech cost estimates you can just see on FAMIS and add a 10% integrator fee for. You don't need to reach out to us. Generally, I think 90% of schools, what they order is either laptops, tablets, smart boards, and sometimes just outfitting a computer lab. That probably accounts for 90% of our technology spending. If it's outside of that, feel free to email us and we could go over it. But that basically covers 90% of the spending we do for tech. We could answer
And-
more specific details beyond that.
And from our standpoint, if say you put in a request for $300,000, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but we're only able to do an allocation for 200,000, SCA, you can still work with them to be able to
Yes,
purchase
absolutely.
the equipment for the amount that we've.
Absolutely. The technology ones are always flexible. We could always do a little more or a little less.
That's probably the easiest, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we are looking to renovate the bathrooms in our school. How do we go out about pricing things out for our application?
Just reach out to us. Chances are those student bathrooms are pretty typically around 150 per bathroom. That's to just kind of do a cosmetic upgrade and make it ADA accessible. You may lose 1 or 2 stalls, so we get a wheelchair in there, but that's typically the price. Staff bathrooms are about 100 because they're just smaller. But feel free to reach out to us and kind of go over the specifics. DSF could also sometimes give you an estimate for that. They do a lot of the bathroom work for us. So if you know your local DSF folks, they can come out and give you an estimate. They can send that to us.
Yeah, we get a lot of requests for bathrooms, so that's very helpful. Are sound panels for a cafeteria an eligible project for Reso A?
If we order enough sound panels, yes.
They have to together meet the $50,000
Yes.
minimum threshold. Okay. Makes sense. Is a whole building upgrade a possible project?
We typically do not do that with Reserway. We really constrict it to one space. Coordinating a building-wide program is very difficult with Reserway because you never know what you're going to run into, frankly. If you, like we could do the PA system, but for example, if you're going to rewire a whole building, I'm just making up a project right now, you're going to end up triggering a whole bunch of other requirements in the process of renovating every single room in the building to the point where like the cost of the project would explode, and it's almost impossible to know how much a project like that is going to cost before an architect and an engineer go out to the school and take a look at those rooms. So we really do avoid whole building projects because estimating a cost for something like that is kind of out of the scope of what's possible. And that same person just asked, is an electrical upgrade possible? We do electrical upgrades. That shouldn't be difficult. Those tend to not be whole building, right? It's usually a few rooms and then just wiring of a few different lines. So that's pretty straightforward and a yes.
Awesome. Okay, this is a longer one, but our OTPT have been requesting a sensory swing attached to our ceiling for our ASD Nest program. They don't know how much it will cost. Would this reach the minimum application cost, or we would need to request additional renovations to that same room?
We couldn't do just the swing, so we would, I don't know, renovate the flooring or add additional items to meet eligibility. We've done rooms like this that are kind of sensory, a little bit of the sensory gym items. Those are typically like 150 to 250, depending on the items the school wants. We could try and get on the lower end if you just kind of really want to meet the eligibility minimums.
Okay, this is a question for our office, and I'll just kind of try to summarize it, because it could be applicable to more than one school here, but they're familiar with our portal, but they would like some history or some assistance in managing all of their outstanding grants. They feel like there's some funds that have been unspent and they want to know who to reach out to. The answer to that is myself and to Maite. And they have a project that has been stalled due to new regulations. Who do we speak to? I think the answer here is to start by setting up a meeting with our office. Anything we need additional guidance on, we will reach out to SEA and or loop us all together. But let's start by, again, meeting together. We can go through the history, the grants that you have that are outstanding, our history, and then we can take it from there. Is there a way to see online all grants we have received funding for? That kind of is the similar question as the question before. We don't have a way to search online on our website outstanding grants, which is why I recommend setting up an individual meeting with our office and we can go through everything that's outstanding, and then where there's again discrepancies or additional information needed, we'll reach out to SCA. Okay, when will last year's capital grant awardees be posted? Good question, actually. And the answer to that is any day now. I just submitted some website updates, but in the interim, you should have already received a grant award letter, either a yes or a no. If you have not, for some reason, sometimes we, again, depending what email address we had associated with the application, maybe we sent it to either the wrong person or it was missed, reach out to us on an individual basis and we will make sure that you get that information. Okay. Are science lab rooms eligible for upgrades? What if multiple lab rooms need updates in a campus building shared by multiple schools?
I would recommend you do one room at a time only because you don't want all your labs shut down at the same time for construction. But yes, lab rooms are eligible. Let us know the details when you reach out to us about the scope, because renovating a traditional chemistry lab versus renovating a STEM room are dramatically different in cost. And sometimes pictures are helpful because if your lab hasn't been touched for 30 years and you have those old tables, the demo cost of those is tremendously higher. So just reach out to us. on any specific project estimates, reach out to us, tell us your quick scope of work. Sharing a photo or two of the room is very helpful, and we'll work with you on an estimate and kind of let you know what to expect.
And I'll just add, I think just strategically, if you ask for one room at a time, that makes the cost much more manageable on our end in terms of being able to allocate the funding. So you could actually have a like room by room, or, you know, move forward, instead of everything being, you know, held up because you're asking for a larger price tag. Okay, someone said thank you, and thank you. I'm glad you found this informative. And we'll be posting this to the website. PA question, can we use Reso A for system upgrades? Yes, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And then reach out to us for an estimate.
Yeah, do you have an estimate? Because my thoughts have been, or they can be quite expensive, correct?
Yeah, it goes two ways. If you need to do a full SCA, like brand new PA system for your building, that's going to be expensive. That's probably going to be north of 600,000, maybe more depending on the size of the building. If you just need a few tweaks to the system, we can investigate if that's possible to begin with. So reach out to us soon on that one. That actually requires us to send out a team to kind of check to see if it's possible to begin with. So reach out to us as soon as possible if you have a question about your PA specifically.
Okay, that's good to know because we had a couple of those last year. How would you address the need to replace a cafeteria co-located floor that needs new tiles and flooring?
That's pretty typical. Full flooring replacements in cafeteria is not a problem.
And most of the work tends to be done in the summer, correct? When
Yes.
students are not in.
So students are never in the building when we're working. It's why our estimates are so high, because at 9 p.m. sometimes they start working. But yes, students aren't in the room. All the work's done at nights, weekends, and during the summer if the building is available.
Right, good to remember. Okay, another thank you and thank you. And it looks like our final question. If we are applying for an AV upgrade for our auditorium, do we contact SCA or is there somebody else we should reach out to?
Yeah, just contact us. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating. If we missed anything, obviously reach out to us individually. We'll be sharing these presentations. We will be posting everything to the website, including the links to the applications, meeting requests, and the recording of this webinar. I really want to thank Masis and everybody at SCA. Without you, we wouldn't be able to answer those technical questions. So really, really, really appreciate your time and your
Absolutely.
help.
We'll be here next year.
Okay, great. And thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.